So sequence risk is what makes retirement planning different from other wealth building phases, because you're coming down the mountain, so to speak. If you think about building wealth is going up the mountain, you're building your assets. There's a fundamental difference because now you're going to come down the mountain and now you need to start spending on the assets. Now, sequence risk is the order of returns. So it's not just about the returns that you're going to get over retirement, over a 30, 40-year period. It's about what's the order of those returns and when do they occur. And the bottom line is what happens is it's called pound cost ravaging, which it basically means that when the market is down, if you're drawing down on your portfolio, effectively it exacerbates the impact of the downturn and means that the money runs out way faster. So you could have someone who on one retirement journey, so they could have the same return after 40 years. So they could have the exact same return. But if one person had a really bad run of returns in the first 10 years compared to the person who had, a really good run of return of 10 years and had the bad one at the end, you're going to have wildly different elements the amount of money left over because of that pound cost ravaging element. So that's a key element that we need to manage in retirement. And sequence risk is ultimately challenging to deal with because we don't know how much the market's going to decline. We don't know how long it's going to take to come back. I did a video and I modeled 1973, which if you don't know is like a really bad run of returns for US and UK. So for 1973, using the MSCI World, the decline was 21 months long, so quite a long decline. And the lowest from peak to trough was minus 46%. Yeah. So yeah, very, very painful. Really high inflation and oil shock, one of the worst sets of returns that we had. And I looked at different types and ways of managing those risks. So basically the conclusion of the end of the video is that none of the options I looked at actually worked. And we'll go into some of the options now. But it really does depend on how you manage those particular risks in retirement. And I think adapting the spending is going to be the key thing. So should we maybe go over the different ones that we talked about in the video?
The video is called Don't Retire Until You Know This One Risk. Yep. I thought it was excellent.
Oh, thank you.
It was honestly a really good video. And what you basically did was go, okay, these are the ways that people talk about managing sequencing risk.
Yeah.
High cash balance, bond ladders.
Yeah,
you went through them all. He just was like, no. You're going to run out of money at 70. Yeah. Basically, you pick the worst period. And if you're just so unfortunate enough to kind of retire at this point, we laugh, but it was, I was sat there like, shit.
Yeah, and that was definitely, on reflection, it was definitely a failure in my scripting.
No, it wasn't. In fact, you can't like woolly up the message. It was factual. It was important information. And you did give a thing at the end. I know what you mean. You want to tie it up in a neat bow at the end and go, but don't worry, it's all going to be okay.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just not.
And at the end of the video, I was like, see you next week.
Yeah.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah. So don't beat yourself up about delivering the facts.
Yeah.
And in a way, because now people can prepare for that.
Yeah.
There was people in that year that probably really struggled. I'm sure they did okay in the end. People survive, don't they? But it's important that people know, because even I'm guilty of going 3-year cash buffer. That'll be enough.
Yeah.
And in reality, let's go through it.
Yes. So what I did in the video is we have two different kind of cash flow models, and I kind of played about and used some of the data. And one, which is the system called Buoyant, you can basically look at the amount of assets someone's got, look at the fixed return, and it basically calculates this is exactly the amount that you can spend in retirement. So it goes based on all these assumptions. If you want money to last to 100, this is the amount of money that you can spend per year. And it's really useful because it basically just calculates that exact amount, factors in tax and all the rest of it, really easy. The problem is what's called deterministic modeling, where you factor in a straight line return, and that's not how it works in reality. Returns are really variable. So what I did in that one is okay, so we've got the target that the kind of the straight line analysis is saying that the money can last for. What happens if we now use these different kind of ways and methods to manage sequence risk? So we keep that spending, which says on a straight line we're going to get to 100, but then we overlay it on a really bad time. So I use the MSCI World at 100% equity, and then I used Basic, which is all in shares. And then I had a look at these particular buffer strategies. So these strategies that I'm going to go over, they're designed basically to manage that sequence risk. So if the risk is that the order of returns is going to be really damaging, can we maybe look at our assets and our portfolio and make some adjustments to them so that we can maybe deflect some of the downturn.
Or like kind of outlive it, or, you know, like step away from needing to take money out of the portfolio and relying on some other form of income to see out the dip, essentially.
Exactly. You know, and I think when I went through in the video, what I kind of was saying was that, you know, if we use that kind of coming down the mountain analogy, you know, a cash buffer is kind of like camping out in a tent. You know, it's kind of
and just waiting for the storm to pass.
Yeah, wait for the storm.
It was a great analogy.
Yeah, thank you.
You kept going, I know it's shit, but this is good. As a man who likes a mountain analogy, I can appreciate it.
Exactly. Yeah, where is your Welsh Choir mountain? We'll get onto that later. Anyway, don't want to lose the listeners on it. Anyway, so how does a cash buffer work? A cash buffer, basically, you hold 2-3 years in cash. The environment now for cash is much more favorable than it used to be. You're still not likely going to beat inflation, or hardly going to at all. But the idea is that if you see a significant market decline, you then draw on your cash, and that basically lessens the pound cost ravaging of the portfolio. It means when the portfolio's down, you're not having to encash your portfolio for your spending, because you're going to spend on the cash. And when we have a look at, there was a paper by a guy called Wade Farr, we had a look at his kind of analysis across various years of the US market. And he says, well, actually, if you skip a year or two, when that happens, when the market pulls back, it has a really big difference. You know, it can really have a difference on how long the portfolio lasts. Now, when I did it in 1973, it did not work. However, that's just because that's a really exaggerated option. So I think for most market declines, a cash buffer, well, it's certainly going to be better than nothing, and it is going to help somewhat as far as how long your portfolio lasts. Other options we looked at was what's called a bond ladder. So you kind of, you start to get a little bit technical, but it's not really that technical. So what's a bond? It's an IOU to company or government. And how a bond ladder works is basically you look at your requirements of income, and depending on the bond, so gilts are loans to the UK, basically to the UK government, I should say. And they're considered the most secure option that we have basically in financial markets, certainly in the UK anyway, because if the UK is struggling, they can just print more money effectively. And the idea is how kind of a bond ladder works is you basically, the key benefit of a bond is if you hold it to maturity, if it is a single bond, you basically just get your capital back. So it's ultimately backed by the UK government. You'll get a certain yield on it, which is risen now. So you'll get, 4% or whatever. And ultimately, when it matures, you just take your cash back and you use it for spending. So the idea is that your bond ladder basically can sometimes give you a slightly better return than a cash buffer, and you match your income needs for your time horizon. Because that is a big problem with sequence risk. If you're all equity in retirement, then the challenge you're going to have is what happens if I pick the unlucky time? What happens if it is the next major downturn and I'm needing to draw down on the money?
Be sod's law for the millennials, that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I feel like we will land at the crash. But yeah, so how did the bond ladder do? Pretty bad. 1973 was really a crap year,
I think, and that's the thing that I regret about the messaging, which is that I think what I would have reframed it to is that it works in most scenarios. It's just not in all.
So and what you're saying is bad is people ran out of money.
Yes.
And it was like 70 years old, wasn't it?
It was in the 70s. Yeah.
It was quick that they ran out of
money.
Yeah,
so starting in retirement at 60, and it was running out in the 70s, as opposed to the initial model, which has been based on straight line, which says, right, you're going to go to 100. However, the one thing that I wish I'd kind of added to that, which is the key thing, and it comes back to that adaptive spending, is that it's so easy when we look at these models that we just we look forward onto decades and we think, I'm just going to continue. If we see a market pullback, or if we see things go better than expected, I'm just going to continue on the exact same path, exactly like the example I gave with the 4% rule. And the truth of the matter is, the way I think that you can counteract that and make a success out of your retirement is, of course, consider how to deal with these risks, but be able and prepared to adapt. Which is that if you have your core, so what we do with financial planning with clients is we split their expenditure into keeping the lights on, living an okay life, and then discretionary and lifestyle. So discretionary is kind of like the extra nice bits you might like, and lifestyle is like the ideal kind of, this is what I would be like if I was, going down Edgware Casino every weekend, whatever.
He's definitely a friend of the podcast.
Yeah, he knows where we like to go after we finish filming.
I did not attend the casino. But yeah, exactly. And because the idea being is that ultimately, if we do see a really significant decline, then yes, you can use techniques like a bond ladder, a cash buffer, but also the most powerful thing is actually just to adapt your behavior. So at the heart of it, what basically I think everyone needs in retirement is a financial plan, because that's the thing that's actually going to get you there. It's not magic. It is just something where what you're doing if you're creating a financial plan is you're accepting that you are going to change, the markets are going to change, your assumptions are going to change, but that's okay. That's okay, because that's life. It's crazy to think of it any other way, isn't it? Imagine you were, if you think about something that's just 30, 40 years old, you're never going to be able to predict that with perfect precision. A cash flow plan is something you continue to have to adapt so that you deal with and you roll with the punches.
The target keeps moving, even after retirement.
Yeah, exactly.
It's still moving. And so do you think then that you have, say, a cash buffer or a bond ladder, an annuity maybe, and then you adapt your spending as well? And is that the solution? If you just so happen to be the person that lands on the next 1973, like the worst year ever, can you survive that?
Yeah, I think so, as long as, and I think it's going to be, I absolutely think so. I think if you listen to a podcast like this, you're putting yourself in a great position because you're engaged. The people who I really worry about, the people who don't engage with the finances, and we talked about on the last episode, but it's basically just because it's an empowering thing. We have more control of our finances. It means we can write our own future. There's a downside to that, though, which means our own future is our own responsibility.
That was a clip from our chat with George Agan, financial advisor. To watch the whole thing, click right here. What are you doing? What did you do? What did you do? What did you do?
Smiled. Everyone laughed at me.